Everyone in the room laughed when they saw the maid standing beside the Mafia boss. They thought she was just another person who belonged in the background. They had no idea she was the reason he was alive today. The Whitmore estate stood above the city like a symbol of power, wealth, and influence. Every marble floor, every piece of artwork, and every carefully arranged detail reflected the reputation of Adrian Whitmore. At 43 years old, Adrian was known as a man who commanded attention without asking for it. His name carried weight. His decisions affected powerful people. His presence could change the mood of an entire room. But behind the expensive suits and the carefully controlled expression was a man who rarely allowed anyone close enough to see who he truly was. For years, Adrian believed the world was simple. People respected power. They followed success. They valued those who could offer them something. That was why he never expected the quiet woman working inside his home to become someone who would change the way he saw everything. Amelia Carter had been working at the Whitmore estate for several months. She was a black maid in her early 30s, a plus-size woman with a gentle voice, a calm expression, and a level of patience that many people around her did not understand. She arrived before sunrise, completed every responsibility with care, and treated everyone with the same respect regardless of their position. But in a world where appearances often mattered more than character, Amelia was constantly overlooked. Some guests who visited the estate whispered about her. They judged her because of her size. They assumed her position reflected her value. They saw a uniform instead of a person. Amelia heard those comments, but she never allowed them to define her. She knew who she was. She knew the kindness she carried. She knew that a person's worth was not decided by someone else's opinion. One evening, the Whitmore estate hosted an exclusive gathering filled with influential guests. The halls were bright, the conversations were elegant, and everyone wanted Adrian's attention. Amelia quietly moved through the room, making sure every detail was handled perfectly. She did not seek recognition. She did not try to impress anyone. She simply did her work with dignity. Then one guest looked at her and smiled with quiet arrogance. "It is surprising that someone like her works here," the woman said. Several people laughed softly. Amelia lowered her eyes, not because she felt ashamed, but because she refused to let someone else's cruelty change her peace. Adrian heard the comment from across the room. For a moment, he looked toward Amelia. He noticed something unusual. She was not angry. She was not trying to defend herself. She simply continued helping others as if her kindness was stronger than their judgment. Adrian did not understand why that moment stayed with him. He had seen countless people fight for attention. He had seen people use every opportunity to gain something. But Amelia asked for nothing. She simply remained herself. Later that night, Adrian noticed an old family photograph displayed near his office. It showed him 15 years earlier, during a difficult time in his life that few people knew about. As he looked at the image, a forgotten memory began to return. A rainy night. A young girl with a kind voice. Someone who helped him when he needed it most. Adrian stared at the photograph, unaware that the woman working quietly in his home carried a connection to that night. And the truth he had been searching for all these years was closer than he ever imagined. The whispers inside the Whitmore estate did not disappear after that evening. In fact, they grew louder. Some people believed Amelia Carter should feel grateful simply for being allowed to work in such a prestigious home. They saw her position as a privilege, not a responsibility. They saw her uniform before they saw her character. But Amelia continued moving through each day with the same quiet confidence she had always carried. She arrived every morning before the first light touched the city, preparing the estate with careful attention. She remembered small details about the people around her. She knew when someone needed encouragement. She noticed when an employee was having a difficult day. She offered kindness without expecting anyone to notice. That was what made her different. Amelia did not help people because she wanted praise. She helped because it was simply who she was. Adrian Whitmore began noticing those details more often. At first, he told himself he was only observing the people around him because that was what a responsible leader did. But deep down, he knew something about Amelia had caught his attention. She was unlike anyone he had met in his world. Many people approached Adrian carefully, choosing every word because they wanted something from him. Amelia spoke to him the same way she spoke to everyone else. Respectfully, but honestly. One afternoon, Adrian walked through the estate, and found Amelia organizing a collection of old belongings that had been stored away for years. Among the items was a small wooden box that belonged to his family. Amelia looked surprised when she saw him. "I was just making sure these were kept safe," she explained. Adrian nodded and looked through the items inside. Among them was an old photograph from 15 years earlier. The picture showed Adrian when he was younger, standing beside a small community center after a difficult period in his life. He remembered that time clearly. He remembered feeling lost and exhausted before a young girl had appeared and offered him help. She had not known his name. She had not known his influence. She had simply seen another person who needed kindness. Adrian stared at the photograph longer than he expected. "Do you know anything about this day?" he asked. Amelia became quiet for a moment. Something in his voice told her that the memory still mattered to him. "Some moments stay with people forever," she answered carefully. Adrian looked at her. "Why do you say that?" Amelia smiled softly. "Because sometimes the smallest acts of kindness become the biggest memories." Her words felt strangely familiar to Adrian. He could not explain why. It was as if he had heard them before, years ago, from someone whose face he could no longer remember clearly. That evening, Adrian searched through old records connected to that period of his life. He had spent years trying to find the person who helped him during that forgotten night, but the information had always been incomplete. A young girl, a kind voice, a simple act that changed everything. As he reviewed the details again, one small connection appeared. The location, the timing, the description of the person who had helped him. Adrian looked toward the hallway where Amelia had been standing earlier. For the first time, a possibility entered his mind. It seemed impossible. The woman everyone overlooked might be connected to the moment that shaped his entire life. But Adrian Whitmore had learned one thing about truth. Sometimes it hides in the places where nobody thinks to look. The possibility that Amelia Carter was connected to his past stayed in Adrian Whitmore's mind long after their conversation. He had spent 15 years remembering a person he never found. A young girl who appeared during one of the most uncertain moments of his life. Someone who offered help without knowing his name, his reputation, or the influence he would one day have. She had not cared about who he was. She had simply cared that he was a person who needed kindness. For years, Adrian believed that memory belonged to a completely different chapter of his life. But now, the woman everyone ignored inside his own home seemed connected to that forgotten moment. Adrian began looking deeper into the details. He did not want assumptions. He wanted the truth. The more he searched, the more small connections appeared. The location matched. The timing matched. The description of the person who helped him matched. But one question remained. Why had Amelia never said anything? Why had she worked quietly in his home for months without revealing that connection? Adrian watched her from a distance over the following days. He noticed how she treated everyone with the same patience, whether they were important guests or employees whose names many people forgot. He saw her leave a warm meal for a worker who had stayed late. He saw her comfort a nervous young employee before an important event. He saw the same kindness that had stayed in his memory for 15 years. It was not an act. It was simply who she was. One evening, Adrian found Amelia in the library organizing old books. The room was quiet, with only the soft sound of pages moving and the rain tapping against the windows. "Amelia," he said gently. She turned around. "Yes, Mr. Whitmore." Adrian looked at her carefully. "Have we ever met before?" For a moment, Amelia became still. It was not fear. It was the expression of someone remembering something from a long time ago. "Why would you ask that?" she replied. Adrian studied her reaction. "Because there is something familiar about you." Amelia looked toward the window. "Sometimes people remember moments differently," she said. "The person who receives kindness may remember it forever, but the person who gives it may not think it was anything special." Those words affected Adrian deeply. They sounded exactly like the kind of thing the person from his memory would have said. He wanted to ask more, but Amelia gently changed the subject. She did not seem interested in receiving recognition. She did not appear to be waiting for gratitude. That confused Adrian more than anything. Most people would have used such a connection to gain an advantage. Amelia seemed determined to keep it hidden. Meanwhile, inside the estate, some people continued underestimating her. They saw her simple clothing and her quiet personality as signs that she was unimportant. They did not realize that the woman they dismissed carried a story that connected directly to the most important turning point in Adrian's life. Later that night, Adrian opened an old box from 15 years ago. Inside was a small bracelet that had belonged to the person who helped him. He remembered the kindness behind it. He remembered a promise he made to himself that he would one day thank that person properly. As he looked at the bracelet, he noticed a detail he had never seen before. A small symbol engraved on the side. The same symbol appeared on a necklace Amelia wore every day. Adrian froze. For the first time, the impossible began to feel real. The woman everyone called just a maid might have been the person he had been searching for all along. Adrian Whitmore could not stop thinking about the symbol on Amelia Carter's necklace. It was a small detail that most people would have ignored. But to Adrian, it felt like a piece of a story that had been unfinished for 15 years. He held the old bracelet in his hand and looked at the matching symbol again. The memory became clearer. A rainy evening. A young girl with a calm voice. A simple gesture of kindness during a moment when he needed it most. For years, Adrian had searched for the person behind that memory, believing that finding her would finally allow him to express his gratitude. Now, she was standing inside his home every day, quietly taking care of others while the world continued to overlook her. The realization was overwhelming. But Adrian decided not to rush toward Amelia with questions. He wanted to understand her first. He wanted to know if she remembered the same moment. The next morning, Adrian noticed Amelia preparing breakfast for the estate staff before beginning her usual responsibilities. She was not required to do it, but she believed small acts of kindness could change someone's entire day. Adrian watched as she placed a note beside a meal for a tired employee, offering simple words of encouragement. It reminded him of the girl from 15 years ago. The same warmth, the same thoughtfulness, the same ability to make someone feel seen. Later that afternoon, Adrian asked Amelia if she had ever lived in the area near the old community center from his memory. Amelia looked surprised by the question. Yes, she answered after a moment. A long time ago. Adrian's heart raced, but he remained calm. Did you ever help someone there? Someone you did not know? Amelia became quiet. She looked down at her hands, remembering a chapter of her life she had never considered important. I helped many people, she said softly. I do not remember every moment. Adrian understood then. The reason she had never mentioned it was because she did not see herself as someone who had done something extraordinary. To her, helping another person was simply the right thing to do. That was exactly what made her different. Before Adrian could ask more, a group of guests arrived at the estate for an important gathering. Among them was Victoria Hale, a woman from Adrian's social circle who had always believed status determined value. When she saw Amelia speaking with Adrian, she smiled with quiet judgment. I hope the staff are not taking too much of your time, Victoria said. The comment was polite on the surface, but carried a clear message. Amelia remained calm. She simply stepped away and continued her work. Adrian noticed. In the past, he might have ignored such remarks. But now they bothered him. He began seeing the unfairness that Amelia had quietly faced every day. That evening, Adrian looked through more records from 15 years earlier. Finally, he found a document that connected everything. The name was not listed clearly, but the details matched perfectly. The young person who helped him had a family connection to the same neighborhood where Amelia grew up. Adrian leaned back in his chair, silent for a long moment. The truth was no longer a possibility. It was becoming undeniable. The woman everyone treated as invisible had been the person who gave him hope when he had none. And Adrian Whitmore was about to discover that the greatest debt of his life belonged to someone who never expected anything in return. The truth Adrian Whitmore had spent 15 years searching for was finally standing in front of him every single day. But instead of feeling relief, he felt something he was not used to feeling. Regret. He thought about all the times Amelia Carter had walked through the halls of his estate, quietly serving others, while people judged her without knowing her story. He thought about the moments when he allowed those judgments to exist without questioning them. The woman they overlooked had once been the person who gave him a second chance at life. Yet she never mentioned it. She never used that memory to gain influence. She never asked for recognition. That was the part Adrian struggled to understand the most. In his world, information was valuable. People used every connection they had to move forward. But Amelia had carried the greatest connection to him for years and chose silence. The next morning, Adrian asked Amelia if she could meet him in the library. The room was quiet, filled with old books and memories from generations of the Whitmore family. Amelia entered with a calm expression, unaware that her life was about to be seen differently by the man standing before her. Adrian placed the old bracelet on the table. For a moment, Amelia said nothing. Her eyes moved toward the symbol engraved on it, and the memories she had kept buried began to return. "Where did you get that?" she asked softly. Adrian looked at her. 15 years ago, someone helped me during a difficult night. She was young, but she showed me a kindness I never forgot." Amelia lowered her eyes. She already understood where the conversation was going. "You were there, weren't you?" Adrian asked. The silence that followed answered everything. Amelia took a slow breath. "I did not think you would remember." Adrian looked surprised. "How could I forget?" Amelia smiled gently. "Because I was not trying to be remembered. I just did what anyone should have done." Those words affected Adrian more than any explanation could have. He had expected a story about sacrifice or a hidden desire for recognition. Instead, he found the same humility that had defined her all along. "Why did you never tell me?" Adrian asked. Amelia looked around the library before answering. "Because I did not want your gratitude to become the reason you respected me." Adrian remained silent. He understood exactly what she meant. She did not want to be valued because she had saved him. She wanted to be valued because of who she was. That realization changed everything. Later that day, Adrian noticed how differently he saw the estate. The staff members he once passed without much thought suddenly felt more visible. He noticed their effort. He noticed their dedication. He noticed the people who kept his world running while remaining unseen. Amelia had not only reminded him of a forgotten moment from his past, she had opened his eyes to the present. Meanwhile, the people who had mocked Amelia continued believing they understood her. They saw her position, but never her character. They saw her appearance, but never her strength. They saw a maid. But Adrian now saw the person who had shown him compassion before he ever had power. That evening, Adrian stood near the large windows of his office, looking over the city lights. For the first time in years, he understood that the greatest debts in life were not always financial. Some were written in moments of kindness that changed who you became. And the person who saved him 15 years ago had unknowingly been teaching him a lesson ever since. The discovery of Amelia Carter's past changed the way Adrian Whitmore looked at everything around him. The walls of his estate, the people who worked inside it, and even the decisions he made every day suddenly carried a different meaning. For years, Adrian believed that being powerful meant being in control. He thought respect came from reputation, influence, and the ability to solve problems with resources. But Amelia had shown him something he had never learned from anyone else. True strength came from character. The morning after their conversation, Adrian found Amelia preparing the dining room, as she always did. She moved with the same calm focus, arranging every detail with care. Nothing about her behavior had changed. She was still the same person who arrived early, helped others quietly, and treated everyone with kindness. Adrian realized that the secret he had discovered did not create Amelia's value. It only revealed what had always been there. "You really never planned to tell me," Adrian said when he approached her. Amelia looked at him and smiled softly. "No, because I did not help you 15 years ago, because I wanted something later." Adrian nodded slowly. Her answer stayed with him. He was used to relationships built around expectations. People often helped him because they wanted access to his world. Amelia had done something meaningful and then continued living her life without ever mentioning it. That kind of sincerity was rare. Adrian wanted to show his gratitude, but he knew he had to be careful. He did not want to turn appreciation into another form of control. He did not want Amelia to feel like she owed him anything. So instead of offering a simple reward, he asked her a different question. "What do you want for your future?" Amelia looked surprised. It was not the question she expected. She had spent so much time answering what other people needed that she rarely thought about her own dreams. After a moment, she shared that she wanted to create something that could help others. She wanted to build a place where people who felt invisible could feel respected. Adrian listened quietly. Her dream was not about luxury. It was not about changing her image. It was about creating the same sense of kindness she had given to him years ago. That conversation changed Adrian's approach. He decided not to give Amelia something that would make her dependent on him. Instead, he offered a genuine opportunity where she could use her own abilities and ideas. He wanted her to succeed because of her talent, not because of his name. Meanwhile, the people who had once mocked Amelia began noticing the changes happening around them. The same woman they had underestimated was now being trusted with important responsibilities. But the most surprising thing was that Amelia never used her new position to make others feel small. She remained patient. She remained respectful. She remained the person she had always been. Adrian watched this transformation with admiration. He finally understood that Amelia's greatest gift was never the fact that she had saved his life 15 years ago. Her greatest gift was that she had continued choosing kindness every day afterward. That evening, Adrian stood in the quiet hallway of the estate and looked toward the room where Amelia was finishing her work. The woman others had ignored had become the person who changed the way he saw the entire world. And for the first time in his life, Adrian Whitmore understood that the most valuable people were not always the ones standing in the spotlight. Sometimes, they were the ones quietly making the world better when nobody was watching. The truth about Amelia Carter slowly began to change the atmosphere inside the Whitmore estate. It was not because people suddenly became afraid of her, or because her position had changed overnight. It was because they finally started seeing the person they had ignored for so long. Adrian Whitmore had always been surrounded by people who judged others based on status. In his world, names, wealth, and connections often determined how someone was treated. But Amelia challenged that way of thinking without ever trying to prove a point. She simply lived according to her values. After learning about her connection to his past, Adrian became more aware of the small moments that revealed her character. He noticed how she greeted every employee in the morning. He noticed how she thanked people who rarely received appreciation. He noticed how she carried herself with confidence even when others tried to make her feel invisible. One afternoon, Adrian hosted an important gathering at the estate with several influential guests. These were people who had known him for years and were familiar with the way his world operated. Among them was Victoria Hale, who had always believed social position determined a person's worth. When Amelia entered the room to complete her responsibilities, Victoria looked at her with the same judgment she had shown before. "It is interesting how quickly people forget their place when they receive attention," Victoria said quietly. The comment was subtle, but everyone understood the meaning behind it. Amelia remained calm. She did not respond with anger. She simply continued her work with the same dignity she had always shown. But this time, Adrian did not ignore it. He looked around the room and realized something important. Silence could also become a choice. For years, he had allowed people around him to measure others unfairly because he was too focused on his own world. But Amelia had never been silent because she lacked strength. She had been silent because she refused to become like the people who judged her. Adrian stepped forward. His voice remained calm, but everyone in the room listened. "Respect is not something given only to people with influence," he said. "It is something every person deserves." The room became quiet. Victoria looked surprised because Adrian had never challenged these attitudes before. Amelia looked at him, not because she needed him to defend her, but because she understood the meaning behind his words. He was not protecting her out of pity. He was acknowledging the truth. Later that evening, Adrian spoke with Amelia privately. "I should have noticed sooner," he admitted. "Not just the connection between us, but everything you have done every day." Amelia smiled gently. "People usually notice what is loud. They forget to notice what is consistent." Adrian thought about that sentence for a long moment. It described Amelia perfectly. She had never demanded attention. She had never asked people to recognize her kindness. She simply continued being herself, even when nobody was watching. As the days passed, the people inside the estate began treating Amelia differently. Not because Adrian ordered them to, but because they finally understood what he had already discovered. The woman they once overlooked carried more strength and dignity than many of the people who claimed to be important. Adrian had spent years building a reputation that commanded respect. Amelia had spent her life quietly earning it. And now, the entire world around them was beginning to see what Adrian had learned first. True value is not created by status. It is revealed through character. The changes inside the Whitmore estate did not happen because of one dramatic moment. They happened through small decisions, quiet conversations, and the gradual understanding that Amelia Carter had always deserved respect. Adrian Whitmore began seeing the world differently. He no longer measured people by what they could offer him. Instead, he started noticing what they gave without expecting anything in return. Amelia had spent years doing exactly that. She had brought patience into difficult moments, kindness into ordinary days, and dignity into places where others often forgot to show it. As Adrian continued learning from her example, he realized that helping Amelia build a better future was not about giving her something he thought she needed. It was about creating an opportunity where her own abilities could shine. He invited Amelia to join a new community project connected to the Whitmore Foundation. The goal was to support hardworking people who often went unnoticed, including service workers, caregivers, and individuals trying to rebuild their lives. When Adrian first explained the idea, Amelia looked uncertain. "Why me?" she asked. Adrian smiled slightly. "Because you understand people who feel invisible." Amelia looked away for a moment. She had spent most of her life taking care of others, but she was not used to someone recognizing the value behind that. She agreed to help, but she made one thing clear. She wanted to contribute, not simply receive. That answer reminded Adrian of the person she had always been. She did not want a special position because of a past connection. She wanted to earn her place through effort and purpose. Over the following weeks, Amelia worked alongside a team of professionals, sharing ideas and helping design programs that focused on dignity and opportunity. People who had once underestimated her were surprised by her ability to understand problems and find thoughtful solutions. She was not just kind. She was intelligent, organized, and deeply aware of what people needed. Adrian watched her confidence grow. The woman who once stood quietly in the background was now leading conversations and inspiring others. Yet Amelia remained exactly the same. She still thanked everyone. She still listened before speaking. She still treated every person with respect. One evening, Adrian and Amelia walked through the garden outside the estate. The city lights reflected in the distance, creating a peaceful moment after months of change. "Do you ever regret not telling me who you were?" Adrian asked. Amelia smiled. "No, because the person you respect today should not be based only on something I did 15 years ago." Adrian understood. That was the difference between Amelia and everyone else he had known. She did not want to be valued because of one extraordinary moment. She wanted to be valued for the person she was every day. As their friendship grew stronger, Adrian realized something important. The greatest impact Amelia had made on his life was not saving him during that forgotten night. It was showing him a different way to see the world. A way where kindness mattered more than status and character mattered more than reputation. The people around them had once seen a maid who belonged in the background. Now they saw someone whose presence changed everyone around her. And Adrian Whitmore, a man who had spent his life searching for power, finally understood that the greatest strength was the ability to recognize the worth of another human being. Years after the moment that changed everything, Adrian Whitmore still remembered the lesson Amelia Carter had unknowingly taught him. It was not a lesson written in business documents or learned in powerful meetings. It was a lesson found in quiet moments, in simple acts of kindness, and in the way one person could change another person's life without ever asking for recognition. The Whitmore estate no longer felt like the same place. The halls that once represented distance and status had become a place where people felt seen and appreciated. Employees who had spent years working silently now felt respected. Conversations that once focused on influence and success began focusing on people and their stories. Adrian had changed because Amelia showed him a truth he had ignored for most of his life. A person's value was never determined by their position. It was determined by their heart, their choices, and the way they treated others when nobody was watching. Amelia continued leading the community project with the same humility she had always carried. She never allowed recognition to change her. When people praised her, she simply smiled and reminded them that everyone had the ability to make a difference. She believed kindness did not require wealth, status, or power. It only required a person willing to care. Adrian often watched her interact with others and thought about the night 15 years earlier that connected their lives. He once believed that finding the person who saved him would complete an unfinished chapter of his past. But he eventually realized something much deeper. Amelia had not only helped him during one difficult moment. She had continued helping him years later by showing him how to become a better person. One afternoon, Adrian and Amelia returned to the community center where their paths first connected. The building had changed over the years, but the feeling remained the same. People walked through the doors looking for support, opportunity, and hope. Adrian stood quietly for a moment, remembering the younger version of himself who never imagined where life would take him. "Do you ever think about that night?" he asked. Amelia looked around the room and smiled. Sometimes. But I think about what happened after even more. Adrian looked at her. What do you mean? Amelia answered softly. A single moment can change a life, but what we do afterward shows who we really are. Her words stayed with him. For someone who had built an entire world around control and influence, Adrian finally understood that the most meaningful things could not be bought. They had to be earned through trust, respect, and genuine human connection. The people who once judged Amelia based on her appearance or her job eventually learned the truth. The woman they overlooked was not ordinary. She had always carried strength, wisdom, and compassion. They simply failed to see it. Adrian Whitmore had once been a man searching for power and control. Amelia Carter had always been a woman who understood the power of kindness. Their lives crossed because of a forgotten moment from the past, but their journey continued because of the choices they made in the present. And in the end, the world remembered something Adrian would never forget. The people who quietly make life better are often the ones who deserve the greatest respect.